everyone. So my name's Aaron, and I'm here to invite you to do some philosophy with me. And usually when I say I'm a philosopher to people on planes, that leads to the magazine goes up and headphones goes on kind of response. So we'll see if I can do a little better with you all. So philosophy can be understood as a bunch of different things. I'm going to give you two options. One, philosophy is a professional discourse. It's the thing that other people do. People like me who have PhDs in philosophy, who write books with titles that no one then wants to buy. Or we can understand philosophy as a way of life. This is the way the ancient Greeks understood it. And philosophy is something then that we all can do. But instead of having to choose today, I don't want to cause you any stress, you're both right. So philosophy, the way I understand it, is basically just people who put question marks where everybody else puts periods. Now, that could be something we do as professionals, like me. So I put professional question marks behind all kinds of very wordy questions that have a lot of ontological and phenomenological sorts of phrases. But what really matters about philosophy is that we all recognize what happens in life if we start putting squiggly lines instead of just dots. And so let's ask some questions together and see what happens. Now, not all questions are equally valuable. So if you say, what kind of coffee do I like to drink? I find that a stupid question because I don't like coffee. So let's find a little bit better question. How about, what's the meaning of life? Good question? No response. None at all. Why? Because this question is the kind of thing that Monty Python makes a lot of money joking about, right? So let's try to avoid things like that and instead ask a question that has a little bit more focused relevance to us. So how about let's tighten things up? What makes life worth living? A little better? Well, still kind of abstract, not sure what life means, whose life, the life of my dog, what life are we talking about? So I think we make things practical, we make them personal. So let's make something personal. What do you desire most in life? Here, I'm trying to switch the question and make it more like a St. Augustine question. Our identity is constituted by the object of our desire. So let's think about what we desire in order to think about who we are so that we can hopefully put some question marks in really important places. Let's see what happens. There are two common answers to this question, what do you desire most in life, at least as given by my students in Intro to Philosophy. I have asked hundreds of them this question. I only ever get variations of two answers. The first and by far most prominent is they desire success. Not a bad answer. Who doesn't want to be successful, right? Well, second answer, happiness. Happiness also seems like a really smart thing, a little bit more introspective and reflective. People who write happiness always feel self-righteous that they wrote happiness and not success when they hear sort of how this breaks out. But here's the thing. Both of these have some problems. When we seek success, it turns out that we fear failure. When we seek happiness, it turns out that we fear a kind of loneliness. But what's interesting about this is success, though a noble thing, my talk is not, hey, don't seek success, but don't seek success as your ultimate end. Why not? Because if you seek success as your ultimate end, you're always ever making sense of your life relative to some external that you achieve, rather than reflecting on who it is and why you live it in the first place. Happiness, again, a lot better, maybe, but happiness today tends to look an awful lot like, how can I just be in a particular state of mind that you may not be in? So I think the problem with happiness is we confuse it with a psychological state rather than a general orientation towards well-being. So I'm going to suggest that we seek something else as our ultimate end. I'm going to throw out faithfulness as an idea. Maybe we should seek faithfulness. Now look, by faithfulness, I am not talking about any religious disposition. I'm talking about living into what you think matters. Throwing yourself into something on purpose. And this definition of faith, then, is simply the idea that we risk our lives in a direction, that we do things on purpose for reasons, and we recognize that none of it is ultimately safe. So what direction is worth the risk? It's not going to involve skydiving for me, nor is it going to involve law school, right? We all make decisions about what direction is worth the risk. So here's a really cool truth. When you seek to be faithful, you're likely to get success thrown in because you care about excellence relative to what you think matters. But when you seek success, you're likely not even to be successful at what you thought mattered because you aren't actively reflecting and living into that decision. So here's another cool truth. There's a distinction between jealousy and admiration. If we seek success as our ultimate end, we're likely to understand our lives relative to jealousy. I want what they have. I want that car, that job, that 401k, that portfolio, right? That recognition. I'm jealous of them. So I'm not striving to be like someone. I'm striving to have what they have. They are irrelevant. There's no character emulation. If we seek faithfulness, my hunch is that we will cultivate and invite admiration, whereby people matter not just for what they've done, but for being the kind of person who would do it. Think about Mother Teresa and Martin Luther King. So Mother Teresa was actually the inspiration for this talk. She actually says we're called upon not to be successful, but to be faithful. And Martin Luther King, imagine this. If you said, oh, well, he was sought out to be successful at instantiating racial justice, but he didn't quite pull it off. So we would say his life was a failure. What a really bad assessment of him, right? Instead, and this is on the Martin Luther King Memorial, it says, look, I was a drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness. In other words, I lived my life striving for this. Yes, we want to be successful, but success and failure are not defining why I get out of bed and why I do what I do. So here's the big idea we're sharing, right? TED's about ideas we're sharing. Here's an idea I think needs shared more often in our culture that says success, success, success. Seeking success actually makes you more likely to fail at doing what matters. This is true not only for individuals, but for institutions, for groups, for communities. I'm a specialist in philosophy of religion, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Christianity. It's what I work on. I'm a specialist in political philosophy, so let's talk about democracy. And I also happen to teach at a university, so let's talk about college education. These three instances where if we seek success as our ultimate aim, we're likely not even to be good at being Christians, being Democrats, and being university educators. Talk about Christianity first. So look, three people that I have been influenced by: Soren Kierkegaard, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and Anne Lamott. They all wrote in different time periods. They all have different stories. But three ideas they give us is that Christianity is fundamentally about modeling ourselves on a narrative of the divine as humbled, as self-emptied. So Kierkegaard says that when Christianity gets power and becomes a political might, becomes Christendom, what does it need? It needs somebody to bring Christianity back to it, because now it's become triumphant. Dietrich Bonhoeffer loses his life. He gets murdered by the National Socialists toward the end of World War II. He differentiates between costly grace and cheap grace. And he says cheap grace is the kind of thing that can become commodified and sold. Costly grace is the kind of thing that invites us ever forward, recognizing it's not about what we do, but about that for which we do what we do. And Anne Lamott says there's three prayers she likes. I pray these a bunch: help, thanks, and wow. Notice, we start recognizing our insufficiency, then we move to a mode of gratitude as a way of life, and we end in wonder. Philosophy began in wonder, and part of what I'm suggesting is religious existence ends in that same sense of wonder. This is a far stretch from those conceptions of Christianity that model themselves on corporate success, audience numbers, material wealth, and priding themselves on the ability to be better than others. Rather than loving God, we love our own churches. Rather than loving the costly grace, we love the fact that it can be mass-produced. When we seek success, we fail to be what we should have been. What about democracy? Now here, I'm not talking about conservative Democrat democracy. I'm talking about democracy as a mode of human existence and social life that says, at the end of the day, all of us are engaged with each other relative to a commitment to the equality of critique. Every voice is equally able to offer critique and offer praise. That's what democracy is about. It's about equality and liberty to say your voice matters just as much as my own. So, when we think about faithfulness to democracy, here's two good models. Jacques Derrida says that democracy is only ever just when it's not democratic enough yet. Notice, we're striving toward. It's not about pulling it off. We have done it. We are the greatest nation. You end up saying we are great because we recognize there is a long way left to go. We are most democratic when we recognize we are not yet democracy instantiated. We're on the way. Similarly, Chantal Mouffe says, democracy works best when we recognize it as agonistic, conflictual. We need those with whom we disagree to disagree with us and do it well. But when we vilify, when we demonize those with whom we disagree as being irrational or immoral, what have we done? We've sought to win the election while losing the democratic society that we claimed to care about. Finally, college, education. A bunch of you in this room have gone to college. Others of you are in college. Some of you, like my son in the back row, are hopefully going to go to college at some point. Here's the thing. College, at its most basic, is the idea that we can transmit human knowing and also that we can create new knowledge. College is not merely a transmission device. It is an invitation to put question marks where others have put periods and figure new things out. In that sense, I'm actually worried about a new trend towards college success, which ends up being, we will give you real-world experience and a good return on the investment. Now notice, both are good things. We should care about returns on investments because money is finite. We should care about having experience in the kinds of careers we might want to go into because we might decide that wasn't for us. All good. But if that becomes the final end, then notice we care about giving real-world experience in the sense that we want experiences of the world that someone else has dictated as real for us. But the university, its identity, is to invite our students to figure out what world should be made real. Similarly, if we want the return on investment, we've got to recognize that college is more than just dollars and cents and employment statistics. It's not just about what majors lead to high employment, what kind of salaries they average, but it's instead about inviting us all to recognize what is worth our investment of time and energy and emotion and passion and our own sense of value. Let's go back to our first question. What do you desire most in life? My hunch is you all will have different kinds of answers for this, and it will be different at different times in our life. Thank goodness I don't desire what I desired at 20. Right? It would be very bad. But when we recognize that we might want to start thinking about desiring faithfulness, some really interesting things follow. First, when we desire faithfulness, we take ownership of the risk and direction of our lives, not just our careers. In other words, we become the kind of people for whom jobs matter, not the kind of people who are determined by the mattering of our job. Second, when we desire faithfulness, we may find success, but we're not defined by it, which means we are also not destroyed by failure. But remember, it's not just what does one desire, it's what do you desire. When we desire faithfulness, when you desire faithfulness, you are more likely to find question marks themselves as an invitation rather than as an obstacle. And this is really amazing because ultimately our lives will not be defined by where we put the question marks, but where we decided to put the periods. If all we do is live lives where others have handed us periods, we've never actually lived a life that others might want to consider. So at the end of the day, if we understand philosophy as a way of life, we understand faithfulness then as a task for a lifetime, we don't then get that partnership, buy that house, achieve that goal, succeed in our retirement plans, and then get up the next day and wonder, now what? We instead recognize that every day is an invitation to continue moving forward. My wife and I, when we got married, said something to each other in our wedding vows. It was a very simple line, but for me, it encapsulates everything I do as a philosopher. Come, let's walk together and talk along the way. It's the way that matters, not just where we end up. Thank you all so much.